To Friday night's video in our second master series. This is the 22nd video on our second master series and the fourth video on oscilloscopes and the second video on mapping out the sound. So basically with an scope. So now we're going to take this a little bit farther because if you watch the last video I tried to make it as simple as possible, but if you didn't catch it there, it's a little more complicated than that. So if you already got into it and you went, oh bro. So let me try to simplify this. This is a problem. The first problem that I want you to understand is that vocals are the most difficult. So you really are going to have an issue there and you're going to have to really spend some time on there. And I'll explain this to you. The first thing is that we were working off a test capture of ah, right? Now, let's go redo that and take some test captures that go A, ah, O, I, E. Now, this are just a few examples of what the vocal transducer will do. It will do a lot of different things and a lot of different articulations, a lot of things. But these give you targets. So, vocals are vocals or really complicated synth patches are difficult in mapping. You want to do it with vocals. I don't do it normally with complicated synth patches because it's ridiculous. For you to be able to, if you took a complicated synth patch and took a map of it and then went back with no idea of what was even involved in making that synth patch, the likelihood of you being able to match it perfectly are not very good. So, but with vocals, it's a little different. So here's an example of this. Now, this is with articulations also. So I really want you to spend time, especially with your vocals, singing something. A, I, O, I, E, ah, su, ni, boo, fi. I mean, all kinds of different things. It sounds stupid, but you eventually start to understand the concept of that vocals can be complex. So the reason why I had you with that ah is because that way if you got this performance down here and you've got some spot on there where the vocalist is going ah, then I go down, you've got this ah, to really sound sculpt on and check all your sculpting and everything you do to it. That's really easy to visualize, and you've got a good map of it. That way that while you're checking things out, that you can, check that footprint. So no matter what vocalist you bring in, you can have them go, ah, ah, how they normally sing, so you can get a footprint of it when you're processing, or, you have a footprint that's a basic understanding of that. But it gets complicated. So, going through there and mapping out these ones, I'll give you an understanding of this. To give you an idea, these aren't even articulations. I could sit here and where I will go. You can go all day long. Wild articulations. Vocalists, I've seen some vocalists do articulations that are just unbelievable. Not that I am that good, but I'd like to say I am, so, thank you very much. But anyway, let's look at this. I turn this on and I've got this vocalist. Now, this first one, he's going A. There it is. There is that cycle, him just going A. All right, so if I go back a little bit and I do it again, here's him going Ah. There's that cycle at Ah. And here is that cycle at O. And then here's that cycle at I. Oops, hold on. Here's that cycle saying I. All right, hold on a second. Let me go back one more time. I apologize. I. All right, and here's that cycle when he says E. E. Now, if you rewind that and look at those, you'll see how different those waveforms are. Now, this is just very simple. These vowels, whatever you want to call it, that are very common for people to be singing along and say them. I, oh, yeah, they do. So you mapping them out is a great place to start. But, go through all things you think are possible in vocals. Get used to looking at them, looking at those patterns so you can visualize them. It's very important. And the more of these maps you get, the better you're going to be. If you get some vocals comes in and he's starting to sing because he starts doing this stuff and you're sitting around watching his stuff, and you're going, well, here he goes, and I'm watching what's going on. I got no way to see what's going on. What is that? What is he doing there? I don't know. I can see a pattern, but what is it? So it's very complicated. And also with articulations, you've got a bass that the guy's using a guitar pick, or the bass and he's using his fingers, thump, 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 thump. Or you got a bassy slap bass player, bang, 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 bang. They are going to have different waveforms and different cycles. So getting used to looking at them, getting some good, maps of them to, really understand what you're looking at can be hugely important. And sometimes you get like, let's say you've got, if you don't worry about if you get cycles, I got this cycle here. Now, this cycle, is changing. You can see this cycle changing as this lady's singing, going on to something else. But if I go along here and I find some place, any place that she's going along and singing, say right there. Okay, now I may not know exactly where that cycle is starting and ending, and it might take a little bit scrolling through it, but I can always do this, when I'm making my maps or when I'm analyzing things. It's pretty obvious. You can see a repeating cycle there to check against maps that you have. So sometimes if you got that going on, that's okay. You can still map out any area of this and repeating to the next area. That way that you got this out like that, but every part of that cycle that's been repeating you have mapped out. So that's okay also, because that can be helpful. You can see that, and you can also see a change in between from here, what it looks like here and what it looks like over here is different. That's meaning it's quasi-periodic or close to maybe semi-periodic, quasi-periodic, depending. Quasi-periodic can change a lot to where you can see there's a pattern there that looks similar over a certain amount of time, but it's changed drastically. But it's still very similar to what the pattern started out as. Whereas semi-periodic, it's pretty obvious it's changing some, but it's staying fairly consistent. Whereas like periodic, it's just a complete repeated pattern, exact duplicate. So now this concept is very simple. So you getting that through your head when you start mapping is going to really help you to understand what you're looking at. So you start using your oscilloscope so that it can help you see what's going on. Where your ears are listening, your eyes see the music, and it's really going to help you develop an understanding of that. And same thing having your spectrogram out so you can see the music as well as hear it. So when you're hearing certain things happening, you get used to seeing that. And when you hear certain things happen, you get used to seeing that on the oscilloscope. And I know that sounds funny, but it's very true, because it's like when we talked about in Master Series, I think it was Master Series 3, Master Series 2, number 3, critical listening, accurate listening, and things like that. And really, if you want to get to that next level, that you better start listening, bro. Now, for you to get to that next level, you better start looking, because now you have the spectrogram and the oscilloscope, and we're going to talk a bunch more about it, but you get used to seeing the music. When you're hearing certain things happening, you're getting used to seeing those footprints and those patterns and what it's supposed to look like. That way that you can compare it against footprints you've made and maps that you've made, as well as maps you've made on the spectrogram, as well as getting used to seeing it to where you'll be going along. As you get better, you'll be sitting there and listening to stuff, and even this lady will be singing along, and all of a sudden, Donald Duck thing or some stupid thing going on, and you just go bap right there. What is going on here? What is happening? You pull out your map, and all of a sudden you realize this is way too jagged, or the cycle's too long, or something's going on. You're getting a peak over here. Something is happening that isn't normal. You've processed these before and made them sound great, and then went and looked at what those patterns looked like and have maps, and then you start get used to listening to music with your eyeballs. And I know that sounds funny and it sounds ridiculous. How do I listen to music with your eyeballs? That's what the spectrogram and the scope is for. You just may not be used to using them. because the more you use them, the more you're going to become a better audio engineer and quote closer to that quote unquote virtuoso audio and master audio engineer, because you're really understanding what you're looking at. As things are happening, you got your scope and your spectrometer open, and you hear something, you immediately bam, what is going on there? This lady's going ah, or she's doing this sound, and it's like, well, it looks like an O to me. I mean, it looks like a vocal oh, it doesn't look too bad. Maybe it's a little jagged or something, up in here. When we get done just looking at processing things like that, you'll be like, there's a bunch of high-end hits going on here, or saturation or something. What's going on there? In this area, I need to high-pass or low-pass filter that or something. Or I've got some harmonic that's in the upper end that's causing some type of saturation that I don't like. Bam! This thing just helped you find that and pointed it right out to you that fast. Does that make sense? If you were looking at on the spectrometer, you might not have seen it. You might not have seen that upper end mess kind of thing that some people think they see on the spectrometer. You might not have seen it as well as you would have seen it here. Does that make sense? And so, I mean, there's tons of things whenever we're processing and working with audio that becomes obvious besides just the footprint themselves. So really start really trying to look at those footprints, analyzing what different sounds look like on the spectrometer so you get used to looking at them, not just mapping them out, but that critical listening with your eyeballs. So in different sounds and things that are going on and articulations and, what, vocalists do while they're singing to really start recognizing them. I can recognize when somebody goes oh when I'm listening, and I can recognize it when I hear them go oh on a piece of audio. This I know. If you tell me this is a vocalist, this lady's going oh, I'm almost certain of it. Does that make sense? And there it is. There's a lot of upper end saturation going on here. It's a little jagged. It might have a little bit of distortion in the mid-range area because of the distance of this. As it gets higher, these little jagged things get closer together. As that distortion kind of stuff gets closer to the lower end, these start separating farther away from each other. Those kind of things. You are reading the music with your eyeballs. And this is a huge lesson for you to get in your head if you want to get to the next level, because you will be ahead in the game. And on top of it, when you buy those 2 extra monitors for your spectrogram and big old spectrogram, big old oscilloscope, that actually has use and it's actually helpful. You understand that makes sense? It looks cool and it's actually useful, dude. It's not just flashy lights, and I can read the music from these things. It's great tools, and you will eventually understand as you get better and better and better, the more pertinent that will become and the more of a reality that will become. And it's like you've been trying to listen without half your tools, with your eyeballs. You can listen with your eyeballs as well as your ears to become that much better of an audio engineer, so don't throw them away. But that's the second video, basically on trying to get you to understand the importance of the mapping and the importance of the critical listening with your eyeballs on your oscilloscopes and on your spectrometers, so you really start to be able to see these kind of things, being able to point them out and know when they're happening. It will help take you to that next level. Trust me, because sometimes you'll be going along and it doesn't seem like that's important, but sometimes you just be going along and bam, what is that? And then, I'm not really sure what's going on there. And then you pull out your map. You start mapping against your oscilloscope. You're looking at your spectrogram. You start trying to read what's going on. You're trying to see the music with your eyeballs, what's happening there. It's not always just an issue. It might be just the sounds a little bit off or something. I mean, you know how many times I'll go in there and people say, well, I processed this vocal to where, this chorus, it sounded great. And then I put 6 flags on their DAW. And I go, in those 6 spots, I hear going, ah, and it doesn't sound quite right. And then I hear going, e, and I hear it doesn't sound quite right. And I have them go through there and fix it, those little teeny flags in that 3-bar section, that it doesn't sound quite right, because I know it, I hear it and I get in there and visualize it, and I know that it needs some help. Something needs to happen there and need to work on it to make it to that next level. So it's radio ready. You can send to Sony and say, bro, I'm badass, bro. And that's ready. Off you go. So I know that sounds funny, but it's true. So anyway, I really hope you enjoyed the second video on mapping out mapping things out on your scope and the critical, visualizing music to learning to be able to, see music instead of just hearing it. So peace, self-love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video on oscilloscopes, and I will see you in the next video.